All right, Coach Rob here. Hey, a little bit talking about standards and normatives of looking at your HRV and doing analysis. So first off, a little bit of review on HRV. Contrary to what you might expect, the human heart doesn't beat like a metronome with regularity. But in fact, it continually varies to optimize the functioning of your body. These small beat-to-beat variations is what's known as heart rate variability, or HRV, and can tell us a lot about how stressed or relaxed we are. In particular, HRV tells us about the activity of the vagus nerve, which is the autonomic nerve associated with rest, digest, recovery, inflammation, and immune system regulation. So although HRV has been known about for centuries, and it's been employed in critical medical monitoring and medical research, it's been in space exploration and elite athletics for since the 1950s. It's only recently become available to regular athletes, fitness and health enthusiasts and whatnot, due to recent apps and things like that. Professionals in the field of HRV describe heart rate variability as an index of stress and a vulnerability to stress. And this has two important implications for us. First, HRV decreases with total stress load placed on your body. And this includes physical stress, like workouts and manual labor, whatnot. Chemical stress from your environment, poor nutrition, toxins, and mental and emotional stress from work deadlines, relationships, stuff like that, finances. And then number two, the higher a person's average or baseline HRV, the less vulnerable they are likely to be to stress from these resources. So they'll be able to handle it more readily. One of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to HRV is, where do I stack up? How do I compare? What's important to know is it's generally more important to analyze your own trend over time rather than compare to others. Although, whether it's our competitive nature or just the need to clarify, clearly understand a starting point, we all simply want to know how we compare against others. So what's important to note, and what we're going to be discussing about in this short video, is that when comparing your HRV to others, it's tricky. There's a lot of factors that go into what your HRV is and what it should be. Things that affect HRV are your age, your health, and that's physical, mental, and all that, your gender, your fitness level, how you think about things. So HRV it's sensitive to small changes in physical and mental health. So just the smallest of things will change your HRV. Therefore, when looking to compare your HRV and see how it stacks up to others, it's always best to compare yourself against people with identical demographics. And some of those demographics I'm going to talk about in this video. So first off, age. Age is one of the strongest factors that influences heart rate variability. Lower heart rate variability generally indicates an increased biological age. Higher HRV is correlated with increased fitness, health, aerobic capacity, youthfulness. It's pretty well established that HRV is a measure of biological age, and that correlates heavily with homeostatic capacity. And that's the body's ability to self-stabilize in response to stressors. Studies show that biological age is a better measure for determining health status and risk than chronological age, which it does correlate with biological age. However, there's a lot of going on in the communities now that are discovering and agreeing that lifestyle choices strongly influence your biological age regardless of your chronological age. Gender affects it also. Although age and other factors play a stronger role, gender does have some impact on it. Generally speaking, males have a stronger sympathetic, the fight or flight, drive or tone, than parasympathetic, the rest and digest. However, it is interesting that HRV, the gender variation decreases over the age of 55. Gender-related HRV differences disappear at that point, they believe, because of hormonal restructuring, such as menopause in women and other hormonal changes in men. that make them more comparable over the age of 55. Aerobic fitness. That's one of the most controllable aspects we all have. Definitely don't control our age or our gender. But that's the controllable aspect of health and performance for us all. It significantly impacts HRV values, and it contributes to better recovery, muscle regeneration, energy levels, immune function, improved memory. So generally, a higher HRV is correlated with increased aerobic fitness, and likewise, lower HRV is lower aerobic fitness. And that should make really good sense, since it's pretty well established that regular aerobic physical activity improves cardiovascular function and health, and those are indirectly measured by HRV. So activity versus sedentary lifestyles. There's a significant difference in HRV values between these two populations, both male and female. There was a study in 2008 analyzing sedentary and active young and old males, and it determined that the active sample groups had higher HRV and R-to-R intervals and lower heart rates as compared to the sedentary groups. And coincidentally, it also determined that the older active group showed similar values to the young active group. So that indicates that long-term physical activity performed by the older active group contributed to their improved HRV indices, which gave them a younger biological age. So you could argue and believe that it slows down the aging effect. And this study also measured something called RSA, which is respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And they found similar results as the HRV. It maintained RSA at a healthier, younger representation. HRV's connection to health and disease. One of the big reasons why to be doing this. There's a growing number of studies now that it's easier to get to and stuff, looking at a lot of functions: cardiovascular, respiratory, gastrointestinal, and various other pathologies. And they all show that heart rate variability can significantly decline with decreased health. In fact, changes in HRV have already been correlated with 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death in the US. Some of those are heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory diseases, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, nephritis, nephrosis, and intentional self-harm. One of the values we look at in there is the LF-HF ratio. That's looking at the balance of the systems. And there's a growing evidence that the role of the autonomic nervous system balance and function in a wide range of diseases, such as the ones I just mentioned, which can be assessed by HRV, is associated with these diseases or pathologies. Autonomic imbalance is the imbalance between the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches, and like I said, that's available to you in the lead app with the LF to HF ratio, which I do look at. The higher the number, the more imbalanced things are, and that's why it's a point of concern. Another variable we look at is the SDNN, the standard deviation of the interbeat intervals. They've noticed in studying people that are coming back, patients who have had a myocardial infarction or heart attack, they've noticed that patients with SDNN values above 100 showed significantly higher survival rates than those who had HRV SDNN less than 100. And I'm looking to make sure people maintain 50 or higher. Inflammation and immune system. HRV is associated with immune dysfunction and inflammation, and that's been implicated in a wide range of conditions, much of what we just talked about: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, arthritis, periodontal disease, and several, if not all, types of cancers. And I'm sure it makes sense, since autonomic imbalance is connected disease, and the other discussion we've had, and it's a marker of inflammation. Inflammation can either be localized or systemic. Localized inflammation, that's in response to some type of stress like an infection or an injury. It's our body's way of healing it and letting us know that there's an issue. Systemic inflammation is, I'm sure you imagine, over a whole system, and that's really at the heart of a lot of modern health issues today. Overly stressful work, living environments, environmental toxins, nutrition sources, that a lot of people go with nowadays, disrupted circadian rhythms. Those are all conditions or situations that create that systemic inflammation. And as systemic inflammation exists and continues and gets larger, HRV goes down. Immune system, similar to inflammation, the immune system activation, again, it's necessary for survival. So in the short term, it's a good thing. And actually, this is a good example of why, for some of you guys, I've come at you and said, hey, you may be getting sick, because on the immediate activation of the immune system, you can actually get a significant rise or increase in the HRV. That's why I come to you guys and say, hey, your HRV spiked. How are you feeling? But over time, if there's a sustained immune activity, that's going to drive the HRV down. And that's why if you continue to get sick and you don't get better, you tank your HRV a little bit. Mental health, it's an area that's commonly overlooked and not really considered sometimes when in the health and fitness world. But mental health and physical health, they are linked. One does lead to the other quite often. You can imagine if you work out normally, you don't get to work out, you get a little depressed. And then if someone's depressed, they're more likely to have other types of things come up on them. So that affects HRV in a negative way if it's a negative condition. And then certain mental or psychological conditions can manifest other new physical health issues. And then honestly, even on a kind of a less severe scale, just your mood or your perception of the daily stress can have a big impact on the cumulative state of your health. So what's the takeaway on this whole thing? Well, if your HRV values are below your age, gender, demographic, then you may have underlying health conditions or concerns that are negatively affecting your biological age, and we should look to address that, investigate it. Conversely, if your HRV values are regularly higher than your comparable age, gender, demographic, that's cool. Your biological age might be younger, and you're operating at a healthier, more vital, and possibly more durable and longer life. Generally speaking, increased aerobic and anaerobic fitness significantly increase heart rate variability. And there's factors that contribute to systemic health and well-being that affect heart rate variability also. So it's all of these conditions. And, like I said in the beginning, if you're ever going to look to compare to other people, you need to keep in mind that if you don't know their situation, they may have particulars that are different from you. That being said, there are things that are to be looked at as far as regular values. And that is going to be looking here. Let me lower this down a little bit. So looking across here, and I pardon for the fuzziness. It's something I've tried to expand up. But again, you got to keep in mind, there's no age differentiation. There's no medical differentiation here. But just generally speaking, here's some age ranges. It doesn't give an HRV value, but if you look in the LN, the column 3, the LM RMSSD, if you take that and multiply it by about different programs use different multipliers of 15 to 20. So take on the average, if you multiply that number by about 17, that should give you roughly what the HRV value is. And then you can see PNN 50. That's something you guys see in your weekly and monthly reviews that I'm looking at also. I think the important thing to notice is that the numbers decline with age. So the younger biologically you are maintaining yourself, the higher your numbers will be and maintain. Here's a clearer view. This breaks out by age and gender. And in the notes below, you see they took out subjects that had cardiac arrhythmia, disease, medication, pregnancy, things that would affect negatively the HRV. And this, I'm sure you can see, looks a lot like what I look at also. So there's the, again, it doesn't give a pure HRV value, but it gives the natural log RMSSD. Again, multiply that by about 17. That'll give you roughly the HRV number. If you just find your age range and look through there, that will give you that. The SDNN, notice again, that decreases over time with age. So the higher the number, the better. You can see for the youngest group in the males, it's 50 plus or minus. So again, I'm looking at that number for you guys, the PNN 50, same thing. Looking for that to be over 50 in my watching, because we're looking at health, not just bare minimum needed to be, not ill. You're looking at the LF and HF, which here it's in hertz. In our app, it's in milliseconds, so you can't compare those numbers. And then the LF to HF ratio. So you notice the numbers are pretty low. The LF-HF ratio is how balanced you are. Under 5 is preferable if it's morning readiness. Under 2 is most preferable. And then the SD numbers we don't look at. So finishing this up, bring it to a conclusion. Everybody likes a good graph. So looking at the graph here, you can see the blue line is the average level. And this is just looking at 300 subjects. So it's not a huge population of the study, but it gives some numbers that are representative of kind of normal. So again, it's by chronological age, and it's kind of standard number. So if you're 55, what's standard? An HRV of about 60. If you're on the upper threshold of I'm in the +2 standard deviation of the population limit, and you're 55, then the number's 76 or so. If you're down at the lower limit, at 2 deviations down, then your number's just below 45. Call that 43 maybe. And then it changes with age. It gets out to about 70 when you start to see the bathtub curve coming up. I think that is because the people with lower heart rate variabilities are dying off, because the average lifespan is roughly 75. So we're seeing the people become a higher percentage of the population, larger part of the study as you get the older ages. So that's going to swing it back up a little bit. But anyway, so, the average numbers, 35-year-old, you're about 65, 40-year-old, you're about 66, 45, you're around 64. At 50, you're around 62. At 55, you're 60, 59. Age 60, it's 58. And then 65, you're at 56 or 7. At 70, you're 56 or 7, and so on. So those are standard numbers. I look forward to working with you guys as you see fit to improve your HRV by adjusting your response and approach to the various stresses in your life. So Shannon, I thank you for your time, and adios.